Please help me reach 1000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and share your thoughts in the comments. I read every of them. Thank you.
The phone rang. An unknown number on a quiet Sunday afternoon. When I answered, a stranger's steady voice said 3 words that shattered my entire world. Your wife is cheating. That wasn't a call. It was the detonation of the life I thought I knew. I looked at Clara, my wife of 6 years, who was smiling at her tablet, completely unaware that her secret was about to burn us all down. It was the kind of Sunday afternoon you see in furniture catalogs. The air was thick with comfort. Sunlight streamed through the windows of our apartment, cutting warm, lazy rectangles across the polished wood floor. I was sunk deep into my leather armchair, technically holding a book, but mostly just enjoying the profound stillness. Next to me, Clara, my beautiful, brilliant Clara, was curled on the sofa, lost in her tablet. 6 years of marriage, 6 years of building this quiet, stable fortress together. I remember thinking, this is it. This is happiness. Then the phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it. Sunday calls are usually scams or telemarketers, but something, maybe a twitch of intuition, maybe just boredom, made me swipe the screen. Hello? I answered, my voice deliberately casual, already planning the polite brush-off. Is this Ethan? The voice on the other end belonged to a woman I'd never heard before. It was calm, almost unnervingly so, but I could feel a wire-taut tension underneath it, a forced steadiness that screamed, I am barely holding it together. Yes, this is Ethan. Who's calling? There was a silence, a pause that felt less like a lapse and more like a heavy, calculated breath. My stomach tightened. That's when the day stopped being quiet. My name is Veronica. We've never met, but I think you need to hear something. Something about your wife, Clara? I glanced at Clara. She was still smiling faintly at her screen, her brow furrowed in light concentration, a picture of a domestic tranquility. The innocence of that moment was a physical blow. My hand crushed the phone. What about my wife? I kept my voice low, hoping the sound wouldn't carry across the room. Veronica exhaled, a long, shaky sound. Ethan, I'm just gonna say it. I don't know how to be gentle. Your wife has been having an affair with my husband Mark for the past 7 months. The words didn't land. They hung there, suspended in the sunny air, like an absurd punchline to a joke no one was telling. 7 months? More than half a year? That spanned our wedding anniversary, her mother's birthday, the time I flew 10,000 miles for a work trip, the trip she'd promised me she missed me during. My vision narrowed. What? Who is your husband? My voice was a distant rasp. His name is Mark. He works at the same firm as Clara. They've been meeting in hotels, at his place when I'm out of town, and even in your house when you're at work. At our house, in our bed. The image was a violent, white-hot flash. It felt like being kicked in the chest, the air knocked clean out of my lungs. I looked at Clara again, her composure now seeming like a perfect calculated performance. How do you know this? I managed to ask, the words barely a whisper, filled with a desperate, pathetic hope that this was some awful, twisted mistake, a misunderstanding, wrong number, anything but the truth. Veronica's response was chillingly detailed. I found the evidence, Ethan. Text messages, thousands of them. Photos, videos they sent each other. Hotel receipts on our joint credit card. I've known for 3 weeks, and I've been systematically gathering everything. I hired a private investigator who confirmed all of it. I'm telling you this because I know what it's like to be the last one to know. You deserve the truth. 3 weeks. She had been living with this knowledge, this cold certainty, while I was still happily discussing what kind of paint to use on the guest room. The sheer scale of the deception made me feel physically ill. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Why are you telling me now? I asked, struggling to steady my breath. Because Mark admitted it yesterday. We're getting divorced. and your wife deserves the same consequences he's facing. She hasn't just been lying to you, Ethan. From what I've seen in those messages, Mark wasn't the only one. There were others. At least two other men I could identify from their conversations. Clara has been living a completely separate life, one you know absolutely nothing about. The word others was the final nail. It wasn't a mistake, a slip, or a moment of weakness. It was a lifestyle, a completely fabricated reality. I felt the floor tilt beneath me, the room spiraling. I need to go, I whispered. Ethan, wait, Veronica urged. I can send you everything. Screenshots, dates, locations. You need proof. I mumbled my email address, my mind already racing, and hung up. The sound of the dial tone was deafening. I stood there, the phone heavy in my hand, staring across the room. The silence was immense, yet every quiet moment of our 6 years together now felt like it was screaming at me. Finally, Clara looked up from her tablet. She must have sensed the change in the atmosphere, the sudden shift from cozy domesticity to Arctic chill. Who was that? She asked, her voice light, innocent, and perfectly unconcerned. I walked towards her, every step a seismic shift. I stopped directly in front of her, casting a shadow over her. I looked at her, not as my wife, but as a total stranger, trying to see the calculating actress hidden beneath the face I'd kissed good morning for years. That was Veronica, I said, my voice quiet, flat. Mark's wife. Clara's expression didn't change for a full second. I watched her brain working, calculating, running through scenarios. The brief flicker of panic, quickly replaced by a feigned confusion. She tilted her head, a practiced gesture of innocence. Who's Mark? She asked. That lie, the casual, immediate denial of the very name, snapped the last thread of my control. Don't, I said, my voice a dangerous low rumble. Don't insult me by lying right now. Veronica told me everything. 7 months, Clara. You've been sleeping with her husband for 7 months? The blood drained from her face. Not slowly, but instantly. One moment she was the picture of innocent confusion. The next she was paper white. She stood up, her tablet clattering to the hardwood floor. Ethan, this isn't what it sounds like. Really? My voice was laced with a pure contempt. Because it sounds like my wife has been systematically cheating on me for more than half a year. It sounds like you've been meeting him in hotels, in his apartment, in our house, in our bed, Clara. Clara opened her mouth, closed it, and opened it again. No words came out. I watched her frantic search for an explanation, an excuse, anything that would reframe this nightmare. She was trying to fit the vast, ugly scope of her betrayal into a small, manageable box, and failing spectacularly. I didn't mean for it to happen, she finally whispered, her eyes fixed on the floor. It just started as conversations at work, then coffee, then what, Clara? I spat out. Then you accidentally fell into bed with him? Accidentally did it again and again for 7 months? And what about the others, Jessica? Clara? Her eyes went wide. Michelle. Veronica saw your messages. There are at least 2 other men. How many are there, really? How many people have you been sleeping with while I thought we had a marriage? Tears started streaming down her face, but they felt cold, rehearsed, performative. Ethan, please. I was confused. I felt invisible in our marriage, she wailed. You were always working, always tired. I needed to feel wanted, to feel seen. Invisible. The word detonated in my mind. So, you destroyed us? My voice cracked, raw with pain. You could have talked to me. We could have gone to counseling. You could have divorced me if you were that unhappy. But instead, you built an entire secret life and let me live in a fantasy while you betrayed me every single day. At that exact, crushing moment, my phone buzzed. Veronica's email had arrived. the physical evidence. I didn't hesitate. I walked to my laptop and opened the email while Clara stood frozen, watching me. The inbox was a portal to hell. Inside, the evidence was overwhelming. Screenshots of explicit messages dating back even longer than 7 months. Photos of her with different men. Hotel confirmation emails. Receipts from dates I knew nothing about. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was emotional contempt. I scrolled, and there it was. The absolute worst part. Reading the messages where Clara talked about me. Clara. He has no idea. He's so clueless. Clara. He actually believed I was at a work conference. Each line was a knife, but the next exchange wasn't a knife. It was a bullet to the brain. Mark. Do you ever feel guilty? Clara. Sometimes. But then I remember how boring he is. How predictable. You make me feel alive. I looked up from the screen. My head was ringing. I wasn't just betrayed. I was ridiculed. You told him I was boring? Predictable? That I made you feel dead inside? Claire was openly sobbing now. Massive, heaving gasps. I didn't mean it, Ethan. I was just saying what Mark wanted to hear. Daniel, Ethan, I love you. I made terrible mistakes, but I love you. You don't cheat on people you love, I said, my voice completely empty, devoid of all emotion. Not once. Definitely not for months with multiple people. You don't laugh about them behind their back and call them clueless. That's not love, Clara. That's contempt. The man who'd woken up that morning believing in his marriage was gone. All that remained was a cold shell, an echo chamber of humiliation, realizing that I had been made a fool of for months while an entire network of people, Clara, Mark, at least 4 others, and probably her friends, had participated in my degradation. Clara tried every manipulation tactic over the next hour. She cycled through tears, volcanic anger, desperate bargaining, and lavish promises of change. She blamed her childhood trauma, blamed her work stress, and then, inevitably, she blamed me for not paying enough attention. She suggested we go to counseling immediately, suggested we could work through this, even suggested that I was simply overreacting. I sat through it all, feeling profoundly, utterly nothing. I wasn't listening to my wife. I was observing a pathological performance. The emotional landscape of my marriage had been flattened, scorched by the truth. There was no pain left, only a vast empty space where trust used to be. The man who'd woken up that morning believing in his life was gone. What remained was a machine, focused only on extraction and damage control. I had been made a fool of for months, while an entire network of people had participated in my humiliation. The cold clarity that washed over me was horrifyingly effective. I want you out, I finally said, my voice steady, betraying none of the internal chaos. Pack a bag tonight. You can come back for the rest when I'm not here. Ethan, please, she pleaded, crawling toward me. Now, Clara. She started packing through tears, grabbing clothes randomly, still trying to explain, to somehow undo what was now completely and irrevocably undone. I realized I couldn't be alone with her anymore. I needed a witness, a buffer. I called my older brother, Simon, and asked him to come over. I needed to ensure I didn't say anything that could be used against me later in court. When she finally left, escorted by a grim-faced Simon, the house felt simultaneously emptier and cleaner. It was like surgically removing a toxin that had been poisoning me for years. I filed for divorce the next morning. My attorney, a hard-nosed woman named Ms. Davies, was grimly unsurprised. She said these systematic betrayal cases were sadly far more common than anyone wanted to admit. The full scope of Claire's deception was revealed by the investigation I launched. There weren't just 2 other men. There were 4. She had been running multiple affairs simultaneously for over a year, carefully scheduling her betrayals around my frequent work travel, using girls' nights and work events as cover. She wasn't seeking love. She was thrilled by the deception itself. The risk, the complexity of managing different lies to different people. I wasn't her husband, I was her safety net, the stable income and respectable facade that allowed her to play her games. But the worst discovery came from our joint financial records. She had opened a secret credit card and racked up $18,000 in charges for hotels, upscale restaurants, and a high-end jewelry store. She had been buying lavish gifts for her affair partners with our money, the money I had been carefully saving for the down payment on the house we planned to buy. The contempt wasn't just in the messages, it was etched into our bank statements. She hadn't just broken my heart, she had stolen my future, itemizing the cost of my humiliation to the tune of $18,000. The legal process for me wasn't a negotiation, it was an execution. My attorney, Ms. Davies, was a surgical instrument of retribution. We had all the evidence we needed: screenshots, hotel receipts, a detailed financial report of the $18,000 spent on her various lovers. When Clara's lawyers finally saw the complete dossier, the atmosphere shifted instantly. They couldn't fight, they could only mitigate the damage. The judge, a stern woman with tired eyes who looked like she'd witnessed every type of human depravity, delivered a verdict that felt like a powerful affirmation of justice. She cited the financial waste and emotional cruelty in the systematic deception. Clara was ordered to reimburse the full $18,000 back into my account. I kept the apartment, and she received almost nothing but her personal belongings. The prenuptial agreement, which she had scoffed at in one of her old messages to Mark, suddenly became an impenetrable shield. The most satisfying part, however, wasn't the money. It was the consequence. Clara abruptly quit her job, citing stress, but the reality was that Mark's wife, Veronica, had ensured a professional whispering campaign that was quiet, thorough, and devastating. Mark lost his executive position, a silent, forced resignation, and the scandal ripped through their small professional circle. Clara lost her reputation, her financial security, and the perfect facade of domestic life in one spectacular collapse. The stable safety net I had provided was gone, leaving her to face the harsh, unstable reality of her own making. For me, the initial period after the divorce was agonizingly empty and quiet. The silence in the apartment was deafening, but it was an honest silence, not the tense silence of a lie waiting to explode. I spent months reconstructing myself, learning to trust my own judgment again. The first few times I felt genuine happiness or peace, it felt like a betrayal of the shock and anger that had consumed me. But the real turning point came a year later. I met Rachel. She was nothing like Clara. Rachel was genuine, a little messy, and had a laugh that started deep in her belly. There were no games, no complicated schedules, no sense that I needed to constantly check her phone or question her whereabouts. With Rachel, what you saw was what you got. One evening, we were sitting on my sofa in my living room, the same spot where Clara had sat on that fateful Sunday, and I told her the whole story. The call, the confusion, the clueless message. I told her how betrayed I felt that I was the last person in the world to know the truth about my own life. Rachel took my hand, not with pity, but with a simple, solid understanding. "You weren't clueless, Ethan," she said. "You were just a good man who believed in the woman he married. You didn't play detective because you thought you didn't have to. That's not clueless. That's fidelity." Her words hit me like a revelation. The shame I had been carrying, the feeling of being the boring, predictable fool, began to melt away. It wasn't my fault. My mistake was placing my trust in a predator. The memory of that quiet Sunday afternoon remains, but it no longer holds power over me. That phone call destroyed my marriage, yes, but it also forced me to end a lie I didn't even know I was living. So, if you're watching this and you've been betrayed, I want you to remember this. It is not your fault. The person who cheated made a choice. Hundreds of choices, actually. Every lie, every secret meeting, every moment they looked you in the eyes and pretended everything was fine while destroying your trust. You can recover from this. It won't be quick, and it won't be easy, but you can build a new life that's actually real instead of being built on someone else's lies. And here's the final piece of advice that saved me. Trust should never require detective work. If you find yourself constantly doubting, constantly checking, constantly feeling like something is off, trust that instinct. It's usually trying to tell you something important. Sometimes the worst day of your life becomes the first day of your real life. That Sunday phone call set me free. And finally, I actually felt alive.